All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks a lot for letting me kind of hang out with you guys for a few minutes before we got started. My name is Brady Gaster, and I am a Senior Product Marketing Manager in the Azure marketing team. That is not the only job that I've had at Microsoft. I've had quite a few. I'm kind of in I really like understanding all the different ways that Microsoft deals with and hangs out with developers. So I've been through a couple of different organizations, evangelism, docs, which we'll see here in a minute, engineering and marketing, and all around Azure, all around ASP.NET, and that's kind of where I come from. And you can hear the accent. I'm from North Carolina by birth. I don't think any of my family had any damage, so thank you for asking. So one of the things I always like to start off with when I talk about SignalR, which I've done quite a few of these, one of my favorite things to talk about, definitely my favorite technology. No offense to my Azure technology, that's a pretty close second. But now they're together, so it's kind of a tie. But any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Anybody ever heard that quote? Awesome quote. Why would I have that on the board in reference to something like SignalR? Well, SignalR is a series of open source abstractions, if you will. And we'll talk a little bit about why those abstractions exist. But if you think back to that concept of magic, and you look at a couple of the words on the board right now, you see that those two things usually don't go together, real-time and HTTP. First time you saw that, did you kind of go, no? Anybody ever have that reaction? I know I did in 2011 when I first started messing with SignalR. It just seemed kind of impossible. So I wanted to understand it more. Now, when we talk about these abstractions, I'll explain to you how that works. So what happens in SignalR is that you guys know about this thing called WebSockets. Anybody heard of WebSockets? Okay. Well, WebSockets wasn't always around. Anybody ever heard of server-sent events? That was kind of the precursor. And then, pardon? Oh, pardon me? I thought I had heard a question. Pardon me. So you've got all these different ways that you can kind of emulate real-time over HTTP. Anybody ever have a PM or a client come to you and say, I want the UI to update right away, and I don't want them to have to push the refresh button? Anybody ever have that? So what do? Meta equiv refresh, do a REST API call until everything is cool, just to open a long connection. There's a ton of different ways to do this. Not all of them are great. Effectively, what ends up happening with all of the old school clients and server technology when it comes to trying to emulate real-time and HTTP is this. Client says, you got data, you got data, got data, got data, got data. And the server says, yep. Got data, got data, got data, got data. Does this look familiar? Anybody ever had to do anything like this? Makes you feel real dirty, doesn't it? Can't stand it. All right? Well, then along came WebSockets. And with WebSockets, if you've got WebSockets running on the client and the server, SignalR basically just says, hey, do you do real-time? Server says, totally. And then they both go, cool, let's party in real time. Okay? So that's kind of what happens. Now, does anybody in here honestly think that WebSockets is going to be the last advancement in the HTTP protocol? Come on. Of course not. There's going to be something that comes out after WebSockets. So let's say once you discover this WebSockets thing, and you discover that we have support for it on both the clients and the servers, you decide to start writing code against, some API that sits on top of WebSockets. And everything is working, everything is flying, you've got real-time communications, everything is happy. And then somebody invents something that's cooler than WebSockets. What do you got to do? Got to go back to the drawing board. God forbid your application is not cutting edge, right? The nice thing about SignalR and the things that Damian Edwards and David Fowler, the creators of it, were thinking when they created it was there's always going to be these advancements. So let's write a series of abstractions around those different methodologies. And let's intelligently determine which way we're going to actually do things. So the first thing that would happen is the client would reach out to the server and say it would make a WebSockets request. If the server says, sorry, don't support WebSockets, then it'll try, I can't remember the exact order, but it'll try server-sent events. And if the server supports server-sent events, now that's going to be the protocol that we're going to use. If it doesn't, it's going to back off until it gets to something like long polling. And then long polling is going to be more like the got data, got data, got data. So you guys understand that? And I use guys in a very safe, Gender in specific term, I'm sorry. So what will end up happening throughout this is that we'll actually reach out to the server and try to figure out what is supported, and then we'll party on it. And I'll show you a demonstration of that pretty quick. So I have this silly demo that I like to do when I get started with these shows called the hit counter demo. Anybody ever have to write a hit counter or a Java applet that puts the number of hits on the bottom of the screen? You ever done that? Don't be ashamed. Exactly, like 20 years ago? All right, cool. Yeah, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to build this for you. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. My apologies. Can't really zoom in on this guy. Oh, that's not what I want. Let me open up the right solution. My apologies. Hit counter demo. And when I get into the actual code, I'll zoom in on it. So what we've got here is just a simple, .NET new situation. I just got a brand new empty project. Now I'm running .NET Core 2.1 or 2.2, I can't recall which. So we're going to have one dependency in here. If I were to look in my NuGet window right here, you're going to see that we have this ASP.NET Core app right here, which basically pulls in pretty much everything you would need. You guys see that? Now, if you're not using that particular one, you can actually go out to NuGet, and you could pull down the, if I could find it, you could actually pull down the SignalR guys yourself. So you could actually pull down these SignalR NuGet packages all on your own. You could also do that directly from NuGet for NPM, which we'll see me do here in a moment. Anybody familiar with NPM? Nodes Package Manager? Okay. I'm going to actually pull something down from there. But one thing that you can do is when you want to bring in the SignalR JavaScript client, you can just reach out to a CDN, because we have it on a CDN. So if you don't actually want to install those scripts directly into your folders, you can actually reference that in the CDN. So just calling that out. For me, I'm actually going to do this using NPM because I want to get everything, and I want to show you kind of exactly how to do it. In the old days, you would reference a NuGet package, and it would bring not only all of your .NET stuff, but all of your JavaScript stuff. The JavaScript community wasn't really into that. They want to use Bower or NPM to do all of their client-side libraries, so we've kind of shifted things and put them over there. So if you've done SignalR in the past, there's a slightly different workflow to get started. So I just do want to point that out because it does require a little bit of NPM. Now, if you're in Visual Studio, we have documentation on this on docs.microsoft.com. If you're in Visual Studio, you can use right-click, add client libraries, which effectively is going to do the same thing that you'll see me do from the terminal window. So what I'll do here is just right-click my project, and I'm going to do Open in Terminal. And I want to zoom in on this real quick. Uh-oh. Zoom out. Here we go. Let me do a clear screen. So what I'm going to do first right here is just say npm install ASP.NET SignalR, which you'll see right here. And I'll hit enter. And what will happen now is it's actually just going to bring everything down. And what I'll do next is just open that up in my Finder and zoom back out. And what you'll see here is that I've got this node modules folder, and inside of it I've got ASP.NET, SignalR, and then the distribution. And I've got two files here, SignalR and signalr.min.js. Okay? You guys see how I did that? Just a quick little npm install. You wouldn't have to do the command line trick inside of Visual Studio on Windows. So I just do want to call that out. But what I'm going to do now, if I can zoom back out here, is I'm going to take these two files and I'm going to bring them over here into my JS folder right here. So I'll grab this one and I'll grab this one. Grab this one, and I'll just bring them in and put them right here. Oh, maybe. Is he going to let me? Ah! Come on. Add files. We'll just go to the folder. That's not what I wanted. Sorry. Source. Got it right here. Hit demo. Pardon me. Sorry for the time. SignalR dist browser. SignalR and SignalR min. So I'll just go ahead and add these guys directly to my folder here, and then I can actually reference them from within an HTML page. So there's a couple of steps when you talk about wiring up a SignalR hub inside of an ASP.NET application. I actually did a podcast yesterday with the JavaScript Jabber folks, and they're obviously more into JavaScript than they are .NET. One thing I want to point out is that you could actually have zero code in your hub, which we'll see here in a second, You could have two things on either end, JavaScript on this side, JavaScript on this side, or Java. And you can actually communicate with no code in that hub. You'll see kind of how to do that here in a minute because it's really kind of a dynamic programming approach. So the first thing you would need to do is you actually need to wire up your services just like you would for anything else in ASP.NET. So I would go into here to services, and we have a nice method that just hangs off, add SignalR, and I'll just call that. And I'm going to zoom in for everyone. Apologies. Is that good enough in the back? Everybody okay? Gravy. And so I've done that services.add SignalR right here. And then I would come here and I would say app map use SignalR. And then basically I just have to pass in the routes. Pardon me. And whoops. And I would say routes. Darn it. Map hub. Now you'll see that this is a generic function, and it's basically saying, well, I need you to tell me which hub implementation or which hub you want me to map here. So it's just like a normal MVC route or a web API route. You're going to be able to route an individual URL to an individual hub running on the server. And again, we'll talk about hubs in a minute. So we don't have a hub yet. We need to go ahead and create one. So I'm going to do that now. So this is just my convention. You don't have to do this. You could drop it in the root if you wanted. But I just like to make a new folder called hubs. I guess I'm old school. So right here, I will say add new file. And I'll do an empty class, and I'll just call this guy hit counter hub. And we'll hit enter. And we just have an empty class, nothing special in the class. But what I'll do is I'll inherit from hub, and I'll quick fix and pull in this guy. So now we've actually implemented our hub. And at this point, I can go here and copy this guy out and paste him in here and quick fix one more time. And at this point, it's going to say, well, you need to give me a route. See that string path parameter here? So what I would do is just give it a / and call it hit counter hub or hit counter. Good there. And then we are done in terms of our services.cs wire up. So you want to wire up the service, and then you want to use the SignalR stuff inside of your configure method and route everything to your hubs. You could have multiple hubs, and you could direct traffic to every one of them using separate URLs, just like you would with controllers. That make sense? Any confusion there? Questions about this? Okay, cool. So I want to move right along. The next thing I'll do is I'll go in here to pages, and I want to go into my index.ch.html, and even though I love this wonderful carousel template, I am going to delete it. And the next thing I'll do is I'll actually just put in a div here, and we'll call it hit count, and I will just kind of give it a little bit of space to begin with, and BSP, and we'll make it big. We'll make it H1, so you want to be able to see it. So there we go. So now we've got just a div on the page where we're going to drop everything into. All right, cool. Now what I'm going to do is, because there's a little bit of code here, I'm actually going to use some macros. Yes, I'm cheating. I apologize. So the first thing I'll do is I'm just going to drop in a little bit of code. And the first one here you'll see is that I'm going to be referencing that SignalR.js file. All right? So that's what I'm doing here. Now the next thing you'll see in this line of code, in this line of code here, I've got this class in JavaScript and in .NET and in Java called a hub connection builder. And what I'm doing is I want to create a new hub connection builder, and it kind of uses a fluent syntax. And the next thing I'll do is I'll just say with URL, and I'll provide a URL here. It does not have to be on the same server, and that's important. You know, I could have a server running a hub, and two people in here could be writing JavaScript code on either end of it, and as long as they're routing there to that same URL on some other server that's been enabled with cores, you'd be able to communicate back and forth in real time through a hub. Okay, so I just want to point that out. And we don't even have to put any code, and then we call build right here. The next thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and set up, that's the wrong keystroke. Next thing I'll do is I will basically wire up effectively an event handler. So you'll see here that I'm doing connection.on, and this on is, great little way to be able to handle events. It's sort of a convention in the event handling nomenclature. You just say what the name of the event you want to capture is, or what the name of the event you want to handle is, and then you literally just pass it a callback. I'm going to pass it a hit count, and then I actually want to do something in my HTML with whatever I'm getting from that hub. So if you think about it from this perspective, I'm saying I'm waiting for the server to tell me when this event fires and when it passes me data so that I can then use that data on the client. Make sense so far? Server's going to hit me, and then I'm going to do something. Even though it doesn't make sense that the server's going to push it to the client. That's still kind of weird. All right, so I'm going to back up one more time here and then run one more macro. And that's what I'm going to do with start. Now the connection.start will basically reach out, establish that connection. Obviously, it's going to go through that protocol handshake first. It's going to try WebSockets and then kind of back off from there. So I do want to say that that's kind of the order that you want to do things. Now you'll see that I'm handling my events. I'm wiring up my event handlers prior to starting my connection. That's what you want to do. You want to do all of your ons before you do your start, because then everything is all wired up. Okay, so just want to point that out. I want to zoom back out real quick and hit save. And the last thing I'll do to kind of get this guy ready is I'm going to go into here and drop in one more piece of code or here. Now, obviously, this is not a good idea. Static in one of these little web apps on the server, not advisable. This is just a demo. You'd want to persist that data somewhere in some sort of file, if you will. Now, you'll see that I've got a show hit count method that I'm going to want to call on my server side. And you'll see here that I've got clients.all.sendAsync, because everything in SignalR is going to be asynchronous, hence that high throughput. We'll get into those numbers in just a minute. But at this point, I haven't really figured out when I'm going to be able to send anything to that client. Well, since I'm inheriting from hub, I can actually go in here and I can say override, and I'll say on connected async. And what I'll do at this point is I will increment my hit count, 1, and then I will call the show hit count method, and then I will just return whatever my base implementation is right here. So let's go back to what we've done. Open up startup CS, which is where you always have to wire up your middleware, services.add-SignalR, app.use-SignalR. Then you want to create your hub. Then you want to reference that hub from within your page here. Okay? So I just want to point all that out. Now at this point, what I'm going to do is flip over to my browser because I want to open up a smaller window. I've got everything maximized. So I'm going to open up a smaller window here so this guy's the focal point and minimize this one. And I'm just going to go ahead real quickly and check everything and make sure I'm good. Hit counter. I got hit received, startup. I think we're good. Hit counter's wired up there. I think this will work out. I'm going to go ahead and hit F5 right here and run this guy in the debugger. Always takes just a second. There we go. So now we've got this hit counter open up. We've got 1 hit. That's not so bad. I could do refresh here, 2 hits, 3 hits, 4 hits. But now I'm going to do this. I'm going to open up this one. Then I want to open up this one. And then I'm going to refresh them. See what's happening? We're getting everything in real time. So as one page hits, those other pages are going to light up. Is that kind of cool? You guys dig that? Kind of breaks your philosophy about what real-time HTTP could be. So I'm going to flip back over to my deck real quick and move right along. We talked a little bit about this hub. So I'm going to kind of tell you what you can do with this hub because there's a lot of ways that you can use it. So what I'm going to talk about are a couple of guys on the team. Damien, who's a PM, Glenn, who's a PM, and Andrew, who is a dev. He's an amazing dev, in fact. Built a lot of new stuff. So in this clients object, I can actually target all kinds of different clients using some of the different methods that hang off of this guy. So if you want to do clients.all.doWork or call some method .sendAsync, whenever you do that, you're going to send out to every single client, including yourself. You're going to send a message, and the message is going to go everywhere. But that might not always be appropriate. You might only want to have something respond to you. Like I might want to set something up, and then when it's ready, it's only going to call me back. So that does work too. So that's clients.caller. Let's say you wanted to call other people, and you would call others, and that would be everybody but yourself. That's the point where you would call the other folks in your group. Anybody have any idea what I would use? Let's say I wanted to talk to only the PMs. Anybody want to guess? It wouldn't be others. What do you think my word would be there? Roles, groups. In this case, I could actually just do group, and I could talk to the dev. So Damien sends a message only to the dev. Now, let's say Damien wants to send a message to Glenn. What do you think we're going to swap out with group? Say it again? Glenn user, pretty much. Yep. Clients.user.glenn.dowork. So in this case, that hub is going to give you the ability to route traffic however you want to whenever things are going to happen on the client or on the server. So, a couple of little points. Like I said earlier, I've been messing around with SignalR since before I went to Microsoft. And there's a lot of things that have changed in the world of SignalR for the better. Over here on the left, you'll see the then, and over here on the right, you'll see now. So one thing to point out is that in the beginning, there was only .NET Framework, as in .NET Framework, not .NET Core, because it didn't exist, and JavaScript. There were some experimental Node and Java clients, and there was a really interesting experiment that was done to basically meld Socket.io from the Node community with SignalR from the .NET community. Scale out, absolutely brutal. Scaling out SignalR was very, very difficult. One of the reasons for that was this reconnections guy right here. This line right here, whenever we had automatic reconnections, we would not only try to reestablish that connection, once we reestablished that connection, we would do something kind of interesting. We would try to replay all the messages that had come through. Imagine the buffering. Imagine that. We were using something like gigabytes of buffering for each individual connection. So we had to get rid of that, and the way we got rid of that was we took out automatic reconnections. I'll show you how to do a reconnection later. It's not very difficult. It's 4 or 5 lines of JavaScript. And obviously for the scale out, the way we solved that problem was we added the Azure SignalR Service, which we'll talk about later. And one of my favorite things, no offense to jQuery, I absolutely love jQuery, used it for years and years and years, still do in some cases. But not everybody wants to use jQuery just for the purposes of using SignalR. And you don't have to anymore. It's all built on top of native JavaScript. So you can use Angular, Vue, anything you want. You don't have to do any funny dance to basically make jQuery work with any of them. Again, no offense to jQuery, fantastic framework. The other thing I'll talk about here is that we made it faster. You can see that I say and faster right up here. How much faster? With the WebSocket protocol, we over doubled. So we were having about 1 million, check this out. You think this is, connections? Not connections. This is 1 million messages per second that we could able to pump through. The only thing that ever fell down was the network card, and it just caught fire. So memory flat, CPU flat, network card running away screaming. All right, there's a couple of little bugs that we fixed. I don't know if we've shipped this. I kind of stole this from one of the devs' decks. This is what we're going to have after we fix one minor bug that may have already been pushed out with the .NET 2.2 framework. We've over doubled. Now we're at somewhere around 2.3 million messages you can send per second. What does that tell you? You can use it for anything, right? SignalR's an Uber hammer. I can use it everywhere. Wrong. Not all of those messages will find their destination. And that's not our fault. That's just simple TCP. That's just the nature of the protocol. In some cases, you're going to drop some messages. You never know which messages you're going to drop, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. Things happen. You get out of Wi-Fi. The person closes the lid. You never know what's going to happen, but some messages will get dropped. Let's say you've decided to use SignalR for your shopping cart, and somebody makes $1 million order, and that message gets dropped. Oh well, it's gone. So you don't want to use it for that kind of thing. SignalR's real main usage is to continue to update the client in real time and to let folks know what's going on. Okay, so I do want to point that out. Don't try to just make it your Uber enterprise pub sub system. If I had it my way, it would be one day, but we have to add in a little bit more durability. If you start trying to add in durability, think to yourself, I might have made the wrong step a few steps back. SignalR might not be the right option. Okay, so it's not an Uber hammer, and it has been used as an Uber hammer by many developers, including myself. So I just want to stress that. So we've also got multiple types of hubs, and there's some other things that we can do with the hub, and I'll show you what that looks like real quick. So what I'll do now is I'll flip back over to my hit counter hub, and I want to show you one more thing. We talked about how it knows when things are coming from the server, but what about if a client gets disconnected? Can it handle that? Well, that's the good news. It can. So I want to do another override here, and this time I'm going to hook up the onDisconnected method. And in this case, this hub is going to know whenever this thing drops out. So what I could do here, just kind of copy this code, drop it in here, and change this to a minus. And now what we've got is instead of a hit counter, we have a total active users counter that will change dynamically as browsers hit the site and drop out of the site. So doop, doop, doop. Go ahead and get this guy open, and I'll refresh. I'm going to pull this guy over so you can see it. And I'll refresh, refresh, refresh. So I've got 1 connection, 2 connections. Oh, that's not the URL I wanted to go to. Let me grab this. That's definitely not the URL I wanted to go to. Go here. So I've got 3. You'll see that they've all got 3, and now I've got 2, and now I've got 1. So you can see that in this case, SignalR is knowing when I'm actually closing these browser windows. I think that's kind of cool. Like, it knows when you're gone. Pretty fantastic stuff. First time I saw that, I lost it. One thing I will also point out in that before and after is that we have multiple types of hubs. In the old days, 2011 to 2014, the hub's purpose, like the way you would use the hub is I would say hub.clients.all.whatever. And that .whatever was basically a dynamic object. Anybody like dynamic in C#? You guys ever use dynamic in C#? Here's the more important question. Does anybody not like dynamic in C#? You notice how that audience is a little bit bigger? Because all the hands that didn't go up are also don't like dynamic in C#. Okay? So I just want to point that out. Not everybody liked it. So what we did was we added this concept of a dynamic hub. And I'm just going to show you this difference here. So here you've got clients.all.sendAsync. But what I'm going to do now is just comment this guy out. And now I'm going to take out this send to async. And I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to do that. That. Don't autocomplete for me. And at this point, you can see what I've done is I've just done a hit clients.all hit received. Is that not working out for me? I think that's the way I do it. Yeah. Oh, hit count. There we go. Hit count. Not that. Hit count. And in this case, if I were to run this, it's going to do the exact same thing. Nothing's changed on the client. The client is still looking for the event called hit received, and I'm going to send it that event whether I do the top line or the bottom line. It's up to you which one you want to try. Okay, you can do either one. There's also a third type, which is basically a hub of T. You could do, I some service. And if you were to do that, whenever you were to try to get a client for that hub, you would get strong typing on the other end because it would know I'm going to send you an interface that you can program against. So you have type specificity through the hub of T, you have dynamic and craziness through the dynamic hub, and you have string fun from the regular hub. All of them work the same way. You can do whatever you want. I just want to point all that out. Okay? So I'm going to back all this out. Funny story while I'm setting this next little show up for you, which is what I want to do. Oh, it's down here. So what I've done out here is I've actually published the hit counter demo out to Azure. The reason I've done that is A, Azure's cool. It's the easiest place in the world to publish an app to. But B, it really makes it easy for me to show you the back off because in Azure we have this wonderful little button right here that I can toggle whether WebSockets are on or off. So I can actually turn that on or off whenever I want to. So what I'll do now is I'll go out here to my hit counter page, and I'm just going to really quickly open up my tools, and you'll see right here, you'll see WebSocket connecting to blah, 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 blah. It died. Okay, so that basically tells you WebSockets are currently disabled. So what I would do at this point is I would go over here, and I would just simply turn this on, and then I would hit save. I would let those settings take on my server side. Once those settings are plugged in, and you can see what it's doing here, if I were to zoom back in on it, what you'll see is that it's going to use SSE. So if it can't do WebSockets, it's going to start with SSE. So now what I'll do is I'll just go over here real quick one time. I'll do a refresh. Did it reload? Oh. There it goes. It's reloading. Did I shut it off? And now you can see we have actually established a WebSocket connection because I just enabled WebSockets on my server. So now I've got WebSockets. You see how that works? SignalR just dynamically figures it out. It tries to establish one protocol, and if it won't work, it tries to establish the next. If you guys are getting tired, we have a few extra seats up here in front. Feel free to come on up. So, right up here. So what I'll do quick is I'll flip back over to my deck. I've got a few more slides I want to show you. So I want to build something real-ish, all right, sort of real. We're going to have a little bit of fun with this demo here. Oh, if you want to cross the stage, I don't mind. Come on up here. It's like a Green Day concert. It's awesome. So give him a hand. Awesome. This guy's doing parkour. What's going on? Cool. All right. So now I want to build something real. And when I say real, you know, it's just kind of a fun project that I'm going to do. Something I'm actually kind of working on the side. Any musicians in the room? Sound guy, musician? Dang, dude, really? First sound guy who's not a musician. Who else is? Who else? A couple musicians in the room? Okay, I am too. I have like a lot of devices like this. Okay, this is a Core Volca sample. Okay, and I have a couple other synthesizers in my office at home that I play around with. I like to make electronic music, not techno. Those two things are not the same. I'm gonna go ahead and get that out of the way. Okay, techno bang equals EDM. So I like to make that kind of music, and I'm going to use a product idea that I'm kind of building on just for fun on the side. This is the first implementation of it, to kind of show you a couple more tricks. Now, one convention that I actually kind of interestingly got in trouble for recommending early on, and now it's kind of the convention. I'm not trying to say I was a game changer, it's just it worked out, is that you can send and receive messages to and from the server using SignalR, but there's another thing that you can use to send messages to the server too. You know what it's called? What does everybody want to do today? RESTful. You can use RESTful APIs to transmit or request data from the server. So what a lot of folks started doing is using Web API and SignalR together. And effectively, what we've done in the SignalR core stuff is to make that a little bit easier. So I'll kind of show you that I'm not going to do any live coding for this one, but I'm going to walk through this stuff and kind of point things out. Welcome pictures if you want. Flip back over to my computer. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to open up a new project. Now, there's kind of this thing in the SignalR community. It's kind of become an old joke. But whenever you build an app using SignalR, you have to name it like this. You have to come up with something that ends in R and then remove the previous vowel. You know, it's kind of a silly way to do things, because SignalR is really signaler, but it was created by a guy named Damien Edwards from Australia, hence SignalR. Okay, you got it? Sorry, Damien, love you. So you know, just want to point out that that's kind of, you know, your funny nomenclature for stuff in the SignalR world. So what I'll do here is I'll zoom out, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my Conductor web app. And I want to go into I want to show you this hub right here. And I've got something called a sampler hub. Now this is interesting. You can see I don't have any code in this guy at all. I could actually take that out because everything I'm doing through JavaScript. You can see when I was working on this, I had some stuff in this. I had some stuff in my Web API controller. Eventually, I just took all the code out of the hub. And now pretty much the hub doesn't do anything. Just constructs and passes itself a service. I'm going to use that later, but that's a different conversation. So here's my hub, and in this case, I'm using the hub of T because I've got a service over here called my Conductor client, and my Conductor client just has a couple of methods: on sample played and IAM hardware. And IAM hardware, I don't know if I'm actually using that one, but that's the situation where this guy actually connects to the SignalR hub too, through MIDI. Anybody familiar with MIDI? Okay, cool. Wonderful protocol that will never die. So I'm going to go ahead and close down this hub, and you can see real quickly in my startup CS folder that we're doing all the stuff that we usually do. I'm adding SignalR, and I'm adding my sampler service, which we'll look at momentarily. I'm adding my sampler service as a singleton. So I'm going to create one instance whenever my application launches, all right? Because I'm going to keep track of who's got what sample. That's a cue that you should probably get your camera ready. We'll be there in just a minute. All right? Then I'm going to add my SignalR. And then down here below, I would say use SignalR, and I would just route it. Now, what's really nice about these hubs is they have this concept called a hub context that you can party on the server side without having to actually without having to reference the hub. You don't want to new up a hub. You want to just have the hub running on the server and make calls to it using the context that it happens to be in. And that's how ASP.NET works. It just kind of hangs on to it. So the last thing that I'll do is I'll open up this controllers guy right here. You'll see that most of the code is actually in this controller. And I'll show you this little line of code right here was something that Jeff Fritz and I and a couple other folks who've done a lot of SignalR development, we used to have to figure out how to pass the concept of a hub around. And in the early days of SignalR, there was kind of this global object that just gave you, access to that, it's what's called global host context, and you could get to all of your hubs at once. You don't have to do that anymore. It's great. With DI and IOC support in .NET Core, you can just pass that iHub context of whatever hub it is around, and then you can literally make calls to that hub from anything else on your server. Super easy. So you just pass that guy in, use DI, IOC, have a local property, and you can party on it. Now, in this case, I've got this sampler service. We'll take a peek at that in a minute. And here's my HTTP post method. And this is a situation where my client is going to execute a post up to my web API controller, and then I'm going to immediately turn around and fire an event and let all the clients handle it. So that's kind of that web API for post and get, and SignalR for push. You understand kind of that concept? Does that make sense? Not make sense to anybody? I'll talk to you later. Awesome. That went well. Okay, so that's kind of how we do. And then I've got a reset guy in here. Please don't hit the reset guy. It'll ruin the demo. So the final thing we'll take a peek at is that actual service, this sampler service that we have here. That's not it. The sampler service. Now what I've got is I've got a series of samples. Pardon me. Good job. So what I've got is a series of samples that I just load in that I've set up here on this little guy. And let me fix up my right channel here. So we've got our channel set up. And effectively what will happen is whenever you connect to the client, it's going to give you a sample. And if you're one of the first 10 people, you will get a sample. Okay, so when you hit the page, you're going to see a button. If you just start randomly pushing the button, it's going to kind of ruin it. The name of the app is Conductor. You see where we're going with this, don't you? This is what David Letterman calls stupid pet tricks. Okay, I'm showing my age. You guys know who David Letterman is? Okay, and then obviously we want to release a sample. Now in this case, I would use the release sample whenever what happens? When would I want to release a sample back to the pool? When a client, there you go. I would want to release it when a client disconnects. I ran out of time, so that didn't work. That's why I have a reset method that I'm going to ask you nicely not to hit. Okay, so last thing I'll do is I'm not going to really F5 this guy, but I want to show you, there I go again, I want to show you that everything we've talked about now in terms of the clients being able to reach out and like communicate with a hub or respond to things from that hub, got 7 minutes, this might work. We've done in JavaScript, and you've seen some of this code already. I'm going to do new hub connection, connection.on, and then I'm going to start it. And when we talked about that reconnect concept, that's kind of one of the things you can see here. Whenever there's an error in that connection, this is just kind of the convention, you would set a timeout for 2, 5, for 15, however many seconds you think you need to wait, and then you would just try to start that connection again. So you can see down in the bottom, we've actually got a start method. Start just starts the connection, and I would just recall that start method if for whatever reason the connection were to drop. You can make it more intelligent if you have your own business rules you need to worry about, but that just kind of shows you how it would work. But what I'll show you is you want to concentrate on these lines here, because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the .NET code, and this is awesome. If you look at these guys next to each other, it's exactly the same syntax. That was very much deliberate. Now, I've personally not taken a deep look at the Java client, but we actually have a working Android app sample where you have an Android phone that will establish a SignalR connection. If you're doing anything with mobility in SignalR, obvious caveats, right? If you walk out of the Wi-Fi range, too many people on it, put your phone down in the wrong place, you never know what's going to happen. So, but effectively what we're going to do is whenever I get a hub on this machine, so this machine is actually going to reach out to the server, make a connection in .NET, and then the clients are going to make a connection over JavaScript. And at the very end of it, what we're going to do is whenever, I could do this. I could make this a little bit better. Here, I should increase this. So I've only wired this up for 5 channels, and this API is not exactly elegant. So I'm just going to have to do this real quick. My apologies. 7, 8. So I've got 10 samples. So I apologize for not having done that earlier. 9, and then 10. So, and this, I would just do the same thing here. 7, 8, 9, oh, and 10. 10, there we go. So now we've got 10 channels, we've got 10 instruments, and the first 10 people that actually make a connection are going to be okay. So what I'll do now is I'll right-click my hardware client, and I'm going to say Start Debugging. Setting your rhythm for you. Okay, got that? And you can see that I've got this little app running here. I'm just going to zoom in on it so you can kind of see what's happening. And now what I will do is I will flip over to my browser. Somebody's already connected. And I will open this guy up. And that's when you want to scan this. I can zoom back in on it. Now you'll probably get a button on your screen. Oh, go ahead. What will happen is you'll probably get a button on your screen. And you'll just want to hit that button. All right, who's got bass drum? Raise your hand if you got bass drum. Raise your hand if you got bass drum. All right, ready? Who's got hi-hat? You get it? Go crazy. Have fun. See what kind of noise we can make. Is that neat? You guys like that? God, nobody does this in this room. Incredible. So effectively what we've got here is we've got you connecting to a JavaScript client, sending messages to a REST API in the cloud, and then on the server side, we're immediately turning out and pushing messages back out. And I've got a .NET Core application running on a Mac, connected over USB to a sampler with MIDI, sending messages to it. I like it. I like it. Anybody play MIDI hardware? We should get in touch later. I've got some ideas on how to extend this. Okay, cool. Well, we don't have much time left, but one thing I do want to do is kill the app. Sorry. I want to kill that and really quickly flip back over here. I've got 1 or 2 more things I just want to show you real quick, mainly around that scale out guy. And this is the Azure SignalR Service. I would definitely recommend that you go watch these sessions, because they're really going to give you a great amount of information. You can see here that in the old days, all the clients would reach out and they would just talk to the app service or the app server. And then today, you put that SignalR service in the middle, and it just sets up SignalR connections all across the world. Like you can basically set up a connection to your app server or servers or farm from your service, and then all of your clients reach out and make a connection to that, and it manages all those connections and routes everything. But what about security? ASP.NET SignalR, what does that tell you? Everything you know and love about ASP.NET security is also resident within SignalR. And effectively what that service does is the client reaches out to your real app, makes an authentication request. Your app is then going to wire itself to the service because you've authenticated yourself to the app. It's going to get that token back and then send a redirect response with the auth token and the URL to this guy, and then we're going to reach out and make that connection. So that bearer token is just going to flow all the way through. That kind of nice? Because you use their authorized attributes to do everything, and you can party on it. Did anybody watch .NET Conf a couple of weeks ago? Anybody see any of the sessions on .NET Conf? Well, we had a situation where we had about 4 different streams that we would be showing videos from, and we needed to be able to change those streams. And it's kind of lame to be on camera and say, hit refresh, because people are going to miss it. They might be getting a drink. So we didn't want to do that. So we used SignalR. And whenever we needed to change the feed, we got a little admin panel that we would just push a button, and it would change the live feed in the stream. We had to secure that admin panel because we didn't want any of the party boys out there sending videos we didn't want to be streaming to folks. So we authenticated that guy, and we could actually work securely when we wanted to change the feed, and nobody could get in there. So that was kind of nice. I'm not going to do a demo of that, but what I will highly recommend you do is take a look at these sessions. Anthony did a great session talking about how to use his SignalR bindings in functions. So imagine if you're using Azure Functions and an ASP.NET app together, and you want to throw a message into a queue and it might take a couple seconds for the function to run, and you want to update the client, you could actually call a SignalR hub from within an Azure function using these things called the SignalR bindings. And then that would basically hit the service, and the service would hit all of your clients. So now your users don't have to sit there and wait and wait and wait, and you wouldn't even have to do the SignalR stuff on your own server. A lot of great documentation exists on docs.microsoft.com. I would definitely recommend going out there. And if you're in the JavaScript space, I would take a peek at this. This is one of the reference APIs. We have another reference API for a different protocol that you can take a look at as well because we've extended it so much. So we do have some great docs out there and some great samples. And I have less than 10 seconds left, so I want to thank you all so much for getting up bright and early after going to Universal and coming out. Awesome. Thanks a lot. And if anybody needs to get in touch, literally the best way is Twitter. Brady Gaster, real creative, all one word. If you aren't on Twitter and you want to send me an email, my email address is bradyg@microsoft.com. Send me an email. Before you do, I want to warn you, there's a couple of numbers you learn when you're first a Microsoft employee. One of those numbers is how many emails get sent internally every day. That number's 25 million. I get about 40% of those emails. So if I don't get back to you right away, trust me, I'm trying, all right? Cool. Y'all take care and have a safe trip home.